Google at the time was making more profit in a day than we made in a year. And I'm trying to hire people to come work for me away from Google and compete with Google for talent. Our number one product was a recruiting product. And at the same time, our biggest company challenge was recruiting people. We used to look around and say, man, if our customers know that we don't know how to do this so well, that's not a good look. And so we started to put people in roles that were 50% qualified. And the energy that unlocked, like, whoa, you're going to trust me to do this? If you're a leader and you don't believe culture matters, please don't tell your people you think it does. How can a company think that the only people and the best people for them live close to the company?
Steve, it's great to have you here and appreciate you making the time.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So for the people who don't know you, would you mind giving us a brief intro?
Sure. Let's see. I have been in the people and talent space for probably 30 plus years. I've worked in six different industries in various roles. Over the course of my professional life, I've lived and worked in Singapore for 2 years and in Western Canada and British Columbia for 4 years. As a kid, I grew up in South Africa, but born in America, but raised in South Africa. And so I've probably worked a lot of my life outside the US, although I am a US citizen.
Wow.
And the last regular job I had was the first chief human resources officer for LinkedIn, which was a real exciting time in my professional journey. I joined the company in 2009 when the company was about 5 years old with 400 people. And over the next 4 years, I led the talent function and we grew from 400 to 4,000, 2 offices to 26 and 2 countries to 17 countries through the IPO. And those 4 years felt like 20. And I was not prepared for that. There's nothing in my background that prepared me for that because I was a big company person going into that experience. But having done that and having had a real successful experience there and building a culture, which to this day I'm very proud of as one of the best cultures in the world of work. I left 10 years ago I get asked by companies, leaders, organizations, cities, governments, national countries to help them think through people strategy. And that's what I've really focused on the last 10 years of my life is helping organizations navigate this really complex, unpredictable world of work, which was made even more challenging when the pandemic hit. Right before the pandemic, I had finished a book called Workquake, which when the pandemic hit, I got a little photo here for those people who are watching this.
Okay.
But when the pandemic hit and I finished my book, I went, oh no, this is going to change a lot of things and accelerate a lot of things that I'd predicted were going to change. I'm going to need to rewrite my book. And I didn't know how long the pandemic was going to happen. Nobody did. And I didn't know the long-term effects. So for example, I don't talk in my book around hybrid work situations. That became huge,
That's a
the
tricky one.
battle of the pajama workforce, and so that was something that, I hadn't thought much about, but that is a big thing right now. And what does culture mean in a more remote world? What does teamwork look like when more of us have more people in different locations with different international perspectives, different time zones, different, languages? How do we think about building value in a more diverse world? Right. And so I finally published that in 2021. It came out the end of 21. And that has opened a lot of doors for me to work with organizations. So today I sit on the board of 3 organizations. I advise about 15 companies formally. One of them I was mentioning to you is before we got on air is a company called Koali based in Colombia. And that is a company focused on trying to help make the efficiency between college and first job better for both colleges, students, and employers. And that's pretty cool. And while I do that, I also speak and teach at universities and companies around the world. So it's really fun. My biggest client right now, believe it or not, I have 2 big clients. The city of Lisbon started an incubator for entrepreneurs. So I go over there 4 or 5 times a year. And then having been over there a few times, I met a local business school there called the Nova School for Business. And I was invited to be last year a professor of practice, which means a working professional who comes in to teach students and business people who come to the campus. So That's probably about, 40% of my time is working in that part of the world, which is not a difficult thing to do.
Nice excuse to have to go there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So that's what I do. I'm a
Right.
father. I have 3 boys. I have 2 stepdaughters. I live in San Francisco area, in San Diego, kinda go back and forth. And my boys, one of them's in college and 2 of them hopefully will be in college this time next year. So,
All
yeah.
right. All right. Well, thanks for that, Steve. That's a lot, and there's a lot of topics to talk about. You mentioned culture there, the future of work. So we're going to talk about those.
Great.
But you mentioned one thing, and it was going probably from a more established companies to growing startup, 400 people at the time. How was that transition for you? What what was different? What are the difference between go from a very established multinational company to really a high growth startup? How
Yeah.
was it for you?
Everything. It was so hard. It was so hard because I was so unprepared. And what's different, the biggest difference for me and for anyone who's making that leap either direction, if you work in big companies in the talent function, what you're trying to do is fix what someone made before you. You're trying to make it go faster, better, improve it, add new features to whatever it is:
Hmm.
compensation, recruiting, training and development, coaching, culture, leadership development, all these things. You're trying to sort of, because the company's always changing and the people are changing. So, how can we make these, things that were built for a different time better for now and the future? When you join a startup like I did, nothing's built. So you start with nothing. You start with soft clay. There's nothing to tune because nothing was built. So, for example, you have to say, what is our belief around how many levels we should have in the company? What is our belief around rewards? What percentage should be cash? What percentage should be bonus? What percentage should be equity? What is our belief around our relationship with our employees? How should we communicate with them? And when should we communicate? And what should we share? And how often? And all these things, and how many levels in the organization, or how should we review performance of people? Like, should we write an annual review? Should we not write it? If we write it, should we have ratings? If we give ratings, should we tell the employee? Should we not tell the employee? And if you've ever been in any kind of profession,
Hmm.
whether it's marketing, PR, engineering, finance, human resources, in a big company, and then you go, nothing's been built, it is such a scary undertaking, but it's really exciting because it forces you to have to take your profession down to the ground and say, okay, now I have a chance to build this from nothing. What do I want to do? And what do I want to avoid? And what behaviors will be driven if I make this decision or if I make that decision, right? And it was a big, huge responsibility. It was scary. It was so scary. I can't even tell you. And so, my approach initially was to get my leadership team to work with me on, what kind of company do we want to build? I don't want to come say, this is how we're going to pay people. I want to say, well, you worked at Google, or you worked at Yahoo, or you worked at Oracle, or you worked at Microsoft. What was good? What was bad? What can we take to make this special and unique? And while you're building that, Damien, imagine that you are surrounded by companies who are much better than yours in terms of their success. Google. Google at the time was making more profit in a day than we made in a year. Okay.
That's crazy.
And I'm trying to hire people to come work for me away from Google and compete with Google for talent. And so not only am I trying to build my company, but I'm trying to hire people into something that doesn't really exist yet, right? It's an idea. I don't have a product that's, flying off the shelves. LinkedIn today is ubiquitous. People know what it is. Back in 2009, it was like boring professional network. What is it? Yeah.
And in talking about that, how
E.
how did you guys do that? I mean, competing for talent with all of those big companies that, more established companies, probably clearer career path
E.
and all these perks and benefits and nice salaries. And how do you compete with those guys?
Right. An on-site childcare center and free food and sushi chefs and, buses
Yeah.
taking the employees to and from San Francisco. Like, it was nuts. So, let me add on the stress that I was feeling by sharing with you that, and those people who don't know LinkedIn, um, I'm hoping or thinking most people do.
Most people do.
LinkedIn's main product at the time our number one product was a recruiting product. And at the same time, our biggest company challenge was recruiting people. And so we used to look around and say, man, if our customers know that we don't know how to do this so well, that's not a good look. We need to really be not good at recruiting. We need to be the best in the world at this. Like we have this platform of knowledge and insight and information that no one else has. And there's some, data privacy guidelines that we couldn't look at everything, but we could have a really good sense of, what great looks like. And we struggled and struggled. And so what we did was we experimented and, we would do things like, okay, this Friday, everyone in the company, all you're going to do is recruit today. That's all you're going to do. Everyone, no matter what your job is, unless you have 5 people that you call for a job that are qualified, you don't go home, you know? And we would
Wow.
do things like that. We would say, okay, you're gonna have a huge bonus if you refer someone and they get hired. We would put, referral bonuses. We tried so many things and still we kept losing. And in the end, we finally asked ourselves a great question, which I think is even more important to ask today in a world where people have so many choices of where they can work today. When I started my career, there wasn't an internet, there wasn't a cell phone. You didn't know what was possible. You knew doctor, teacher, lawyer, policeman, fireman, businessman. That's all you knew. And now, my kids see this world of I could be a YouTube influencer or I could sell products on TikTok, and there are thousands of new pathways that people can go through. And so we wound up sitting in a situation where we were sitting, the executive team, there's probably 12 of us, we're sitting one day and my job was to report our recruiting success, which was really report our recruiting failure. Okay. And finally, the chairman's like, hey, like we got to do a better job here. Like, do you need to hire more people? I was like, no, I don't need to hire more people. I said, I'm losing because I'm trying to hire people away from a company that has a bonus and a fitness center and bigger salaries. And I don't have any of those. So you give me those. Now the field is level, but I don't have those and we can't afford those. So we have to have something. And then someone in the room, I don't remember, it probably was our head of sales who was amazing. He said, well, let's ask a question. Why would anyone want to work here? And if you're in a company that's never asked this question, you probably think, oh, they want to work here because we're nice. We like people. We treat people fair. It's a good career. It's a good product. We're going to make money and, you should work here. The problem with that is everyone says that. And so we had to come up with something different. And when we were faced with that question, it very quickly got to our answer, which was you should come here because the problem we're solving really matters, helping people find their dream job. You want your children to have an incredible future. You want your family to have an incredible future. Nobody at Google solving this, nobody at Facebook, nobody at Apple solving this really important problem for the global community. We can help countries identify who's talented and what opportunities are available for those people or what skills need to be built. Like that is a problem we're solving. So, okay, that's our biggest asset. Okay, how are we going to tell the world about that? You know? And then someone else said in the room, I think it was me, but I can't be sure, said, you know, if we're a professional network, and if, in retrospect, it seems so obvious, but at the time, Damien, it wasn't obvious. We sat around and we said, if we are the professional network of the world, we should be the best place to work in the world. Otherwise, what right do we have to help people find their dream job? This should be the dream job for everyone who works here. And so, how do we do that when we don't have fitness centers and gyms and free food and big bonuses? How do we do that? Well, the way we do it is we make a great culture. We make this the best place you've ever worked. So come here and transform the careers of the people of the next generation of the global working community and transform your own career. And this will be the greatest learning journey and impact you will ever make anywhere you could ever work. Now, I can't pay you like Google. I can't give you these incredible free products like Apple can, but I can promise you this will be the greatest journey of your lifetime. And I will commit to that as your leader. So when I interviewed people, I would ask them, when you leave LinkedIn, where do you want to be? What do you want to be doing? And while you're here, I will help get you there. Whether it's a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And if you want to work here for the rest of your life and you want my job, I will help you get my job. I promise you that. And my legacy, with my team, everyone who worked for me that said they want to be head of HR is now a head of HR. And so that was like, I delivered on my promise. But when we started to do that, Damien, it started to give us real confidence. Like, yeah, we got a problem we're solving. And when you walk into an interview and you really believe, the candidate smells it and they want to be part of that and say, okay, you don't want to take a pay cut to come here. You want to go work at Google. Then I would say, okay, well, I'll go call Google right now and let's get you a job over there. Like, what? I said, yeah, we're LinkedIn. We want to help you find your dream job. If it's not,
Your professional network, yeah.
I'll help you find it somewhere else. And that was very, very powerful. And that, I'm skipping a lot of little things that we did, but that was a big part of what turned the tide, and how we were able to compete.
Yeah. So for what I'm hearing, it was about selling the story, selling the vision, the problem you're solving. And I believe that there's a very specific type of person or personality or hunger, because probably not everyone is interested in just, going and building something. They, just want to be
Correct.
comfortable. And so it really does require, you're attracting a very specific type of person with that.
And I would say, Damon, that's a great point, and not a lot of people think like that. And I think every company has to recognize not everyone wants to work for you. Or like not every girl is going to want to date you or marry you. I mean, but some of them will, and some of them really will want to. So who are those people? And that's another thing that we did. We said, who is the ideal person to come here? Someone who loves building, who loves chaos, who loves creating order out of a mess. Someone who's shown us in the past, they do their best work when things are a little crazy, right? And that is an entrepreneur world. It's really, really challenging and complex and confusing. You don't have the answers. And the people that we hired that didn't make it were the people who are used to needing a lot of structure. And we learned quickly, we made a lot of mistakes. But the best thing I think about our leadership team was we tried to improve them as soon as we did. But you're 100% right. Like, you got to find out who's that right profile. And then you start looking at who's really doing great in your company. And then you try to answer, what can we learn from those people? We want more people like Damien. He's a star. So where did Damien come from? Damien speaks multiple languages and he migrated to 2 different countries when he was a child. That's a high adaptability person. Let's try to see that in someone's profile, right?
Yeah. And so talking about that, you mentioned, for example, you never built a company and, went from 400 to 4,000 and through an IPO. So I think it's common in the probably recruiting space that you hire for someone who's already done it, right? So how do you assess that, hiring when someone's never done what you want to do before? What do you ask, or what do you look at, or what, how do you identify who's the right person?
So interesting that you asked that question, because this is really the central focus of the book that I'm writing right now,
Right.
which is we discovered something incredible. When you are not successful recruiting and you have a lot of positions open, you're not able to hire as many people that are as qualified as you would like. Like, let's say going into the pandemic, most
Mhm.
firms, when they post a job, are going to target someone who's 90% qualified. If they're 90% qualified. Why? Because I want to know that I have a high confidence you can do the job. And then I have a high confidence my company can meet its objectives, right? And my board of directors will be happy because we promised this and we delivered this. When you can't do that, you start to take calculated risks and put people in roles that are 40%, 50%, 60%
Mhm.
qualified and say, okay, this person hasn't done this before, but everything in their prior background that we can see gives us confidence they can learn things quickly. And when you're growing as fast as we are, we doubled in size every year, 400, 1,000, 1,002, 2 to 4. That is extreme. And not only is it numbers, different countries, different, you know, products, the number of products we had went from like 3 to like 6, and very different. Like, so complexity is adding beyond just numbers of people, right?
Mm.
And when you add someone in a different country, it's not another employee. It's a whole bunch of different statutory requirements and privacy laws and all kinds of other stuff that you got to um, address. And so what we started to see was something incredible. We started to put, and this wasn't by design. Okay. So I can't sit here and tell you, oh, we were so smart. We figured this out, or we were, let's go look for people who can really learn quickly. We were like, if we don't fill this with somebody, then the person who's there who's doing 3 jobs is going to just tip over and die out of stress because they're doing too much. So let's take some risks. And something incredible started to happen. If you ask any, I'm jumping around here, but let me ask the audience to think about this. If you reflect on the biggest moment in most of any executive's professional careers, you ask them, what was the moment that was the biggest breakthrough in your career? 95% of the time when I ask an executive to answer that question, they'll say, well, I work for this person and they put me in this job that I was not ready for. Like I was scared and they took a big chance on me and I did it. And 2 things happened. My confidence rose and my value to the company was incredible. Right. And now it's like, oh, I can learn something new. I'm not thinking in a silo anymore. And so we started to, again, not because we're smart, but because we were desperate, put people in roles that were 50% qualified. And the energy that unlocked, like, whoa, you're going to trust me to do this? No company would let me do that. That helped us fulfill we're going to be the best place you ever worked before, and you're going to grow and learn more. And did everyone make it? No, not everyone made it, but most people did. And most people were so excited. And that energy turned the job into not a job. It turned it into a puzzle, a challenge, an exciting adventure. And now Simon Sinek says, if you love your work, you don't think about it as work, And we weren't trying to get people to love their work. We were trying to really survive, to build a company quickly, because we were worried, like a lot of startups are, if we don't build this quickly, someone else is going to steal this idea and take it from us, And so we learned that putting those people in, and then as we started to learn that, then we started to learn another important lesson, that we can't win recruiting. We can't. We're just not going to win because people, we're not going to get people fast enough. So what we're going to have to be good at is building people. So we shifted our recruiting from mid-career professionals to mostly campus recruiting, specifically for technical talent. So we would go to some of the best technology schools where we had employees who had gone to school there, like University of Chicago, Urbana-Champaign, UC Santa Barbara. These are not where all the best companies are fishing, right? So we pick special ones that we think great talent, not everyone's there, and we could win there. And on the open market, our win rate was about 60% in a good year. That means 60% of the people we offered would accept. On campus, the people we wanted, 98% accept rate. Wow. So now, in the year I started, we had no interns. The next year we had 5, the next year 50, and the last year 200, okay? And so what happens when you shift your recruiting to new grads is you have to really know that you've got the right amount of coaching and mentoring to help them. And that was a big fear, like, oh, our engineers are not going to, know how to coach, are not going to want it. And the absolute reverse happened. They were so excited to teach and to learn and use new skills. So that, we built this ecosystem over time, that the way we were going to do this. And you think about it, Damien, the interview is a horrible way to make a decision about having someone on your team. It's just, a couple of days, a few meetings, and the person's not even doing the job, and you have to take risks, you have to check an interview. But an internship is a 2-month experiment. They try you out, you try them out. You see, do they like the culture? Do they not like the culture? Do they fit in? And that is a much better way to find fit, right?
Is there a way to replicate that at the executive level? Or any companies that's doing that,
Yeah. I think, I've thought about that. And the only way that gets realized is if, and this is why most companies kill the sabbatical, because I was with an executive once and he killed the sabbatical. I said, why'd you kill the sabbatical? The employees hate it. He goes, because all we're doing is paying people to go interview and leave the company. He goes, why do I want to pay for that? I was like, yeah, but we don't want them here if they don't want to be here. Like we don't want employees who are
Yeah.
prisoners, and he's like, yeah, fine, but I'm still not paying for it. Um, and I think it's challenging because nobody can take a 2-month pause with their company. No company's really got that kind of buffer to let someone just hang out for 2 months. I mean, if you think about it, it does happen because people take maternity leave, paternity leave, where
Yeah.
they have to take a leave to care for a family member who's not well. So it does happen, but at scale, gosh, it would be great. We should if we had just the same way we have this paradigm now, it's like 5-day work week, summer is vacation. Why don't we say that everyone in every career, every 5 years is required to take a 1-year break, you know, or a 6-month break, like everyone. Well, then that everyone's break happens at a different time, and now you've got a pool of, you know, people who are like, hey, let me go check it out. And so, but I do think that it would be great if there was a better way because interviewing is just so filled with faults, and it's a very imperfect science.
I mean, you can practice, what you're going to say in interviews, and, the answer is always the same. And yeah, and senior executives, they know how to interview as well.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think for me, what's more important in assessing a candidate is talking to the people that you worked with
Mm,
than asking you questions. I can see, do I have good rapport with you? But all I have is what you're telling me. That's all I have, you know? And I'm
okay.
always looking for a hole in the story. I'm looking for something, for me, there's characteristics I always look for is like, are you self-aware? Are you going to come to me if there's a problem? Or are you going to try to make me think everything's okay?
Mm,
I want you to come to me with the problem. And I want you to know that if things don't work well, the sooner I know, the better, And sometimes people who are not confident or not self-aware are going to cover it up and they don't want people to know
right.
about things that aren't going well. So there's some of those attributes. Those are not too hard to find, through
Right.
through the interview process. But it's even the best interviewers will tell you, 60% is a good year, and that's 40% error rate. Yeah.
Well, and
Mhm.
that's how it is. You mentioned, I think an important topic to talk about is culture. Everybody talks about culture, and probably it might seem like a subjective topic or thing or element. How do you define, what is culture? How do you define it?
Oh gosh, I would say, on this term of culture, I am a big believer, but I will also say if you're a leader and you don't believe culture matters, please don't tell your people you think it does.
Mm,
Don't tell them that you think it does until you believe, right? And we changed the trajectory of LinkedIn because of our culture. And my CEO didn't believe. He did not believe because he'd worked at places where the executive said this, but they did the opposite. And he
mm,
said, it's a lie. I don't want to have posters that are a trap for me to behave a certain way. You know, I want an environment where people do their best work. And for me, if you want to, you know, define what a culture is, ask the question, why does anyone want to work here? Then you get your answer. Why does anyone want to work here? And all the things that come with that part of that answer that could be because we have a lot of freedom and autonomy, because we really set people up for success, because our focus is your career as important as it is the product of the company, and that could be the culture. But there's no right or wrong answer here. And this is where there
yeah.
is no right answer for what's the right culture, because the right culture could look very different from one organization to the next.
Right. Different companies, different cultures, different
That's right.
objectives. But what in from your perspective, what are the elements that make culture? It's
Sure. Sure.
values.
I would say an environment that provides the opportunity for people to deliver the best possible outcomes, you know?
Okay.
So what is the right environment? Well, what right environment is for me is different than what it is for you,
Right.
and that's where you get to the question you asked earlier, which is how do you know the right people for your organization?
Okay.
And when you're young, like we were as a company, you don't, you have an idea of what you are. It's like I call it organization puberty. You don't really know who you are yet. So you take some risks, and sometimes, and I've been in places like this where I don't like the culture that we have, and I want to hire people who are going to make our culture better, right? And so, and the way I think about culture, we've really done ourselves a disservice in how we describe culture because we use the wrong words. We use words like pillar, foundation, things that never change. And culture is really the embodiment of humans, and we are organic and we're always changing. And then when you get more people in there, the culture has to change.
Right.
It just has to. The sheer law of science. And so I think the best cultures today are the ones that can change and that evolve, but they do have some core tenets, like you said, like, hey, we were really focused on this, or we're really focused on, and that's really, sometimes the reason this can help an organization is because when you grow, you now have people in different time zones, in different locations, and in different cities, and they're going to be asked to make a decision and not be able to call somebody. And if they have the framework, like this is what we're about, then they have a greater likelihood of making the right decision for the company.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and go with that, culture, and you have another topic there, an element which is remote work.
Mm.
So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It probably depends on each organization and the industry sector and what they do. But ha- from the companies you work with, have you seen any organization that's remote work is really working for them?
Well, to have a smart conversation on this topic, I think we have to step back and recognize that most organizations considering remote work started from in-person work,
Yeah.
right? So most of the methods of how they think about teams, how they think about productivity, how they think about developing products together is an in-person model. Okay.
Mhm.
And the pandemic sort of put a challenge to that because we physically couldn't be together. There are very few companies in the world that were built entirely from the start remotely. Okay. Very few. And those companies are worth looking at. But if your company started in person and now you're trying to find more of a hybrid solution, those companies, they're not the companies you should really be benchmarking heavily with because they
Mhm.
built it from the start. You're going through a transition. And some people, if you have manufacturing or retail or restaurants or hotels or hospitals, you have to have frontline workers. So,
Yeah.
what are we trying to solve for here? And when I get asked all the time by business leaders all around the world, Steve, should we be in person? Should we be hybrid? Or should we be fully remote? My answer is yes. And they said, no, which one of those? And I said, yes. And they said, all of them? I go, yeah. I go, what you're really trying to solve for is creating something valuable. That's what you're trying
Yeah.
to solve for. And I believe that if you say we're only in person or we're only remote, you're now excluding part of the workforce from your addressable market of people who want to work for you.
Hmm.
We're only remote. Like my son in college did a remote internship. It was horrible. He just sitting in my house all day, Zooming with his boss. I'm like, get out. And he didn't want to be there, but all these companies cut back on internships, so he didn't have a lot of choice. And so there are a lot of people that want to work in person, and there's a lot of people who don't want to work in person.
Mhm.
And so I think we're making the sausage right now. We don't know. And your question is basically what every leader's asking is, can you give me some examples of where this is really working? Because I don't have a lot of data. That's right. The global community, we don't have a lot of data right now. So the question is, do you want to wait for the benchmark or do you want to become the benchmark? And the way you become the benchmark is you got to try, you got to
Hmm.
experiment. And hybrid, if you think about this for a second, if you ask me, Steve, should our company be hybrid? It's almost like if you were a waiter and I'm in a restaurant, you come to me and say, Steve, what would you like to order? And I would say, I'd like some food.
No, that can be anything. Yeah.
Exactly. So hybrid could be anything. Could be 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. Could be hybrid at a cafe, hybrid at my house, hybrid in the like. Who's
Mm.
hybrid on what days? There's a million iterations of what hybrid could be. It's not hybrid. It's one category with a million possibilities, right? So if I tell the waiter food, they're gonna say, well, hot food, cold food, vegan food, vegetarian, like what? I was like, yeah, it's unsatisfying. And so, I think that the question is, I think your employees, generally speaking, okay, I
Yeah.
think employees want to know their company is willing to try some different things. Just try it.
Try
And if
it.
it doesn't work for you, doesn't work for the customer, doesn't work for the employee, doesn't work for the company, doesn't work for the shareholders, well, then you learn and you adjust. But for you to say no without ever trying it, I think it hurts the credibility with your
Right.
organization. Because what does talent have today? Talent can see more jobs, what's possible more in the world of choice than any time in history. We have more new industries, we have more new sectors, we have more new career paths than ever before. I was just addressing agriculture business a few months ago,
Mhm.
and I did a search. Thank you, ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity. Tell me the top 20 new jobs in agribusiness, and it said, well, we found 50. Do you just want 20? I said, you found 50? Yeah. Things like drone operator, crop monitor. So someone who's operating a drone flying over the fields, looking at the health of the crops. You know, that's a
Yeah.
whole new
Get
domain,
in the yeah.
and so what that means is, if you're a company that's not willing to try or experiment, there's people who will find something. If you don't have it, they'll find it. And, even and the other thing is, one thing we know for sure post-pandemic is more companies are more comfortable today hiring remote people than before. Now, the number was really huge and it's definitely
Yeah.
coming down, but still, most people learn like, wow, I can have a superstar there or someone okay here, you know? Like, like to have the superstar there. I like to try to figure this out. The CEO of Airbnb had a great answer to this question. What do you think of hybrid work? And his answer, Brian Chesky, that's his name. He was asked, what do you think of this remote stuff? He goes, how can a company think that the only people and the best people for them live close to the company? How could you think that? Like,
Impossible.
it's not true. No, you can move them there, but how could you think that the only people that could add value for you are the ones that live close to you? That is so limiting, and it's just faulty logic, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be one way or another. And you mention it.
Yeah.
So let's run experiments. Let's see,
Right.
let's do it for 3 months.
Right.
Let's look at the metrics. Look at revenue. So
Yeah.
you can go and test it.
Correct.
Let's
Correct. On some
let's
period of
not
time.
marry to an option.
That's right. That's right.
Let's try
You
to
ask
open
your
up.
employees, hey, we're going to do this for 3 months, and then we're going to check your feedback. We're going to check customer feedback. We're going to check product, sales results. We're going to look at, how we did in the market. And then we're going to put it all together and let's make a good decision together. Okay.
Mm.
And I think that's the healthy way to do it. Just look at what we're doing right now. When I published my book in 2021, I found very quickly the best method for me to get the word out about my book was a
Mm.
podcast, which 15 years ago wasn't even a thing, you know? And, we were joking before the session, like, hey, what's that microphone you have there? I was like, I didn't have it before the pandemic, But as someone who speaks for a living on stages and universities all over the world, like, I had no revenue, went to zero because no one could be in a conference. So I had to deliver through this medium, and that I learned, hey, sound matters. Your voice matters. So, and that's just another one of those ways. And I want to take the answer to, I want to sort of address your question differently. Like, have we learned yet that cultures are better when there's more remote people? Have we learned that teamwork is better when people aren't together as much? And the answer is not yet. Not yet. You know, like, for example, I love the fact that when I'm on a Zoom call with the team, that the person who's always talking in the room, who's drowning out everyone, can't do that on a Zoom because it just goes
Mhm.
it just goes to no one can hear anything. So now the voices of the people who are quiet in the meeting get heard. Do you understand? On a Zoom, because we have to say, "Oh, you got a point." We wouldn't do that if we're in a room. We just listen to loud, Larry over there, rah, 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 and so there are some things, and being together, we've identified wasn't perfect for everybody, right? And so the other thing that I tell organizations are like, everyone needs to be here. I go, well, for the last 40 years, your salespeople are never in your headquarters. They're out with the customer. You already know how to do remote because your whole sales force who's bringing in revenue is
Yeah.
never here. So don't tell me you don't know how to do remote. Salespeople do it. So what can we learn from salespeople? Well, they have weekly calls in the beginning of the week. This is my quota. The end of the week. How did you do? Next week. What's your goal? For the next week, month, quarter. Right? They have regular check-ins, and it's team and it's one-on-one. So what can we learn from that? Right? So
Huh.
the truth is, and this is why it's such a fun frontier for me right now, as someone who loves the, studying the future work, which by the way should be called the future of living, but that's a whole nother topic, is that we have a chance to build a better future work right now, in all these ways. But it's scary because we don't have a benchmark. We don't like, show me the companies that are doing. No, there are no companies doing it great right now. We're all learning.
We're all learning, and it's about experimenting and testing and see if it works. And if it doesn't, probably don't have a lot of time left here, Steve. But I wanted to ask you this question in Wolf. What's your vision, for the future of work? How how do you believe organizations will be different in a couple of years based on the things you're learning and you're seeing from working all these different companies?
Yeah. Well, the huge elephant that we haven't even talked about yet is artificial intelligence, right? And that I
Mhm.
think is probably the thing that I'm spending the most time learning about and reading about. I probably my ritual every morning is to read for an hour to 2 hours, and it's all about artificial intelligence right now. And just I was giving a talk, and I have a whole class on AI. I'll answer your question in a second, but I think this is on top of mind for all of us. You can't have a talk about this future work without considering AI. I was giving a talk about don't trust the companies that are building AI products to be your source of what is AI, because they have a profit motive, right? So someone then asked me the right question, which I hadn't even asked yet, which was great, was like, so who should we listen to about AI? Who's objective? And so I was like, wow, who do I listen to? And I'm like, wow, a lot of my insight is formed from the Microsofts, the OpenAI. Like I want to hear what they're thinking, but I really want to know what college professors and theoreticians and brain scientists are thinking about relative to AI. So I put a post up on LinkedIn. Who are the people not in big tech that you listen to that you think have very thoughtful perspectives on this? So I got a list of about 40 names and webinars and master classes and all that. This next week, now that I have all those, I'm going to put them into a generative AI tool and I say, here's this woman who's an expert on AI. I want you to give me the top 15 unique perspectives she has about AI. What should we be excited about? What should we be nervous about? And I
Mhm.
think probably if I'm thinking about where this is going right now, I think and I hope that we're going to see AI as a pathway for us to win back our freedom from technology. Because right now, more people are stressed, anxious, depressed, feeling behind because of technology. We have not mastered email yet, okay? And now we have something bigger than email. So let's teach it to give us our lives back, that we're not always feeling like behind, like we have more to do, more to. That's why people say, "Oh, we're going to use AI to make people more productive." Like that's not what people want. People want deeper, more meaningful lives. You know, that's what I hope that we can achieve with AI. So I see a future, and it's going to be slow because this is so counter to how we've been wired of 4-day work weeks, 3-day work weeks.
Mm.
I see a future with most people having multiple employers. Okay. So I have and by the way, all the brain science is saying that the more variety of the problems you solve, the more creative and the more alive your mind is. But
Yeah.
that's not what we've built. We've built one company, one career. You can't move to that department. We've architected for that not to happen, you know? And so
Mhm.
that's what I hope all this data. I was interviewed by a Spanish newspaper yesterday, and they asked me a great question. How will AI change trade unions? What's going to happen? And I said, I think, for example, that trade unions and employers will have the same data now really quickly so that they can disagree with each other, but the data is going to be the same because AI is going to show you, this is what a fair wage is and this is what an unreasonable wage is. So why are we arguing? So in theory, we should have fewer strikes. We should have more agreement because, people can't fake the data now as much, right? And so hopefully we have better conversations and more meaningful. And we do get to a future where people are like really doing stuff that they, really fills them, you know? That's what I hope. And I want to stop talking about, oh, AI is all about losing jobs and this and that. Yeah, it is, but that's such the wrong path we should be going down when we think about the future work. It should be, how do we make our lives more amazing with AI, you know?
Yeah. And we'd love to keep talking about that topic. To
Sounds like
spend
another
hours on
episode.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
another episode. Let's do it, definitely.
Great.
But
Great.
it's been great having you here. Where can people find you? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. I really enjoyed it. And I really appreciate how you host these, that it's not just scripted. I could see you had some notes, but when we hit something that of interest to you, you kept steering it on that thing. So I really appreciate that. You can find me on LinkedIn. I hear it's a pretty good website, by the way. Or you can find me on stevecadigan.com. That's my website. I also have a TikTok channel, and my name's Steve Cadigan, and I have a lot of
Okay.
goofy stories that are there. And But yeah, if this resonates for you, like this, I love helping organizations and teams really think about the future work. And yeah, if that's something that interests you, yeah, please find me.
Perfect. Steve, thank you so much for the time. And let's do another one soon.
Let's do it.